Up next, Webb presents the Egyptian concept of the soul.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the week 3, December 5th edition of this Saturday Streamathon emergency fundraiser series that the Anomaly Archives, a 501c3 Scientific Anomaly Institute organization here in Austin, Texas, is holding until the end of this year. We're raising funds for our nonprofit. This is mostly for our rent. And as I mentioned earlier, we're now looking for a new location. So if you have any good ideas for locations, you can, of course, contact us at anomalyarchives.org or email us at contact@anomalyarchives.org. I'm really excited to bring on our first speaker for the day. Don is somebody who I met many years ago through mutual friends who made me aware of his interesting background and approach to the esoteric. He was going to be one of the presenters at the ill-fated 2001 National UFO Conference that I organized here in Austin back in September of 2001. Don Webb is an American science fiction and mystery writer, as well as an author of several books on left-hand path occult philosophy. He is also a former high priest of the Temple of Set. Webb has published 20 books and over 400 other items covering a broad range of topics. His latest book, Energy Magic of the Vampire, Secret Techniques for Personal Power and Manifestation, will be available in May 2021. He lives in Austin, Texas, and teaches creative writing at the University of California, Los Angeles. And it's my pleasure to bring on our guest for today. Don, how are you doing? Sorry, there, mic's on now.
I said, good. Yourself?
Hanging in there. It's just
good for 2020.
Yes, good for 2020, and as strange as these times are, and as tough as everything is, it is really a pleasure to be holding these events, and I'm just so honored and blessed to have so many folks like yourself willing to donate their time and energy and expertise to present to our audience and to hopefully help us raise some funds and maybe even along the way, hopefully raise funds for our guests as well. So I'm looking forward to your talk. I've had several people mention how much they're interested in hearing this particular lecture, as well as just hearing from you. So I'm going to get out of here and let you take it over, okay?
Okay.
All right. Thanks so much.
Hi there. My name is Don Webb. As Smiles said, I am the former high priest of the Temple of Set. I held that office for 6 years. More to the point, for today's symposium, I have been writing about both current and ancient religions for quite some time. I wrote a book on late antiquity Egypt called The Seven Faces of Darkness. And I want to talk a little bit about my approach, and then why Egypt, and then we'll talk about soul parts. All right, my approach. One of the problems with modern occultism is it's largely fuel for idiots, because it tends to appeal to people who have had very little college or joined something because it was faddish or were just trying some stuff out. Now, the occult works better in those times of your life that things are stressful. You have a lot of access to certain energies you don't have otherwise. Much in the same way, a panicked mother suddenly is strong enough to lift up a Volkswagen and pull her baby out because of adrenaline. There are certain spiritual things that are that way too. So people often pick up the occultism of some flavor or not, keep it for 3-4 years, put it aside, and go on with their lives. And as a consequence, the scholarly standards are extremely low. A lot of occult writers, they look for books that were selling about 10 years ago because there's a cyclic aspect to these things. They pick those books up, they reprint non-facts as facts, and stuff continues on. Egyptian magic and Egyptian religion, very prone to this. And it hasn't helped that some of the classics in the field, like the works of Wallace Budge, are perpetually in print because you don't have to pay Wallace anymore. Now, the thing is, his works were a little dated even at the time, but they're over 100 years old. We don't get a 100-year-old book about electricity when we're going to wire our house. Because I was initiated, taught, trained, however, what word you want, I like initiated, by Dr. Stephen Flowers, the runologist, I've always looked for the toughest scholarly material I can handle. I recommend you do the same. Now, that means for some people, you will be reading Egyptological texts For some people, more popular things like my own work. And with great trepidation, you might approach the internet, because that can be anything until you learn to be a little bit better about it. Now, Egypt has a huge effect on esoteric thinking, particularly in the English-speaking world. And we're going to look at a couple of reasons for that. And then we're going to go in and talk about Egypt herself. The biggest, strongest effect on occultism in the English-speaking world is without a group called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And if you don't know them, you at least know one of their graduates, Mr. Aleister Crowley. This was a Victorian group. And in Victorian popular imagination, Egypt or India were the places of power. Now, this is typical in colonialism. When one group takes over another group, because of some psychological processes, you think the group that's oppressed has magical powers. There's a lot of historical examples about that. Egypt first began getting that from the Greeks, the Romans, and the Persians. They've had a reputation for a long time. Now, the Hermetic Order for the Golden Dawn decided, because there were a lot of texts just being translated into English at that time, that Egypt was the real shit. Man, if the Egyptians thought it, it was great. And so as a consequence, lots of ideas from Egyptian occultism, religion, philosophy were sort of dumped into that blend we call occultism. The other completely different strand that brings Egyptian occultism into the English-speaking world is much more dark and much more evil because of the slave trade. People from a large number of African countries were taken on a lovely vacation to America. If you don't hear all of the sarcastic quotes there, they're extraordinarily sarcastic. And the magical techniques, particularly of the Congo people, very similar to the Egyptian techniques. For example, petitioning the dead for help, because these both come out of this same once kind of pan-African culture that existed. Now, unfortunately, because we kind of have colonial brains, we look at the Egyptians, who kind of have brown skin, and sub-Saharan Africans with black skin as diverse groups. Culturally, linguistically, a lot more ties there. We just have this kind of colonial brain. So these two forces strongly permeate any kind of esoteric practice you have in America. Now, if your esoteric practice came from your grandma that did root work, you're going to see some similarities. If your esoteric practice came because you joined some group that's a Golden Dawn offshoot, for example, the OTO, or to a lesser extent, the Temple of Set, you will also have this Egyptian, or at least pseudo-Egyptian, blend. So some of these ideas are probably working in you. And of course, Egypt is a place of tremendous romanticism, right? We got the mummy movies. They are just cool. So a lot of this stuff is already in your psyche, although you don't know how to do it. Now, my theory of magic, which is basically what I received from my initiator, Dr. Stephen Flowers, is that if you use precise tools to get the stuff that's already in your psyche energized, it will work better. Magic is largely a matter of intent. I mean, you could do magic by reciting nursery rhymes as long as your intent was very strong. But if you do something that's actually precise, you're going to get better results. Kind of the wiring diagram. All right, let's talk a little bit about Egypt, the Egyptian worldview in general. Now, Egypt existed as a coherent civilization for about 4,000 years. That blows everybody else out of the mix. China comes close. Egypt, great coherent civilization. But the Egyptians did something that no other people in the world did. Egypt decided that to be Egyptian, you adopted the idea of being Egyptian. Let me say what that means. During the 30 dynasties of Egypt, which is a very highly, wonderfully documented civilization, which we'll talk about why when we talk about soul parts. During the 30 dynasties of Egypt, you would have pharaohs who had skin a little browner than mine and bright red hair. Why do we know that? Because their mummies have the red hair. Oh, they're Caucasian. Or you wait a couple of dynasties, you have pharaohs with dark black skin. The Egyptians did not think of these as two different groups. It wasn't the white guy, the black guy, the brown guy. It was, do they speak the Egyptian language? Are they interested in being part of the Egyptian community? Man, I think this is the perfect cultural template for America today. We could have a unified culture. It doesn't have to just be English. English and Spanish, I think, would be a good choice. But the idea of if you think you're American, be part of the community. Now, Egyptians have a reputation of being very xenophobic. They fear foreigners, but not in the sense we do. They don't want to, have the Hittites build a wall and pay for it. That's not the Egyptian approach. The Egyptian approach is, if you want to come live here, you can be Egyptian. You can even take your gods and bring them with you. We'll just fit them into the pantheon somewhere. Oh, Asarte, yeah, that's Moot's cousin. Okay, fit her in. Baal, looks like Set. We'll call him Baal Set. Fit him in. Even those Hebrew mercenaries who wrote in a god that they call Yahoo, which we call Jehovah. Hey, we can make him a moon god. Bang, fits in. No other culture quite does this. They really could adapt, but they didn't adopt. Why? It's one of the reasons why Egypt is amazing. Another reason why Egypt is amazing is they developed a complex soulcraft. Now, our host culture, meaning the culture you grew up in, if you're understanding the language I'm speaking now, is a Christian culture. Doesn't mean you're Christian, but it does mean the concepts of that culture are the first things that went into your brain. And frankly, Christianity has the simplest soul craft of anybody. You got a body, you got a soul. Maybe you got something called a spirit. We're not quite sure what that is. There's a problem with soul crafts like that. It does not explain wanting to do different things. It doesn't explain how you can have two completely separate impulses at the same time. One of the reasons why Christian soulcraft is not really useful, because the real condition of human beings is we can have a lot of different thoughts going on and impulses and moralities and being pulled in a lot of directions. If you have a polypsychism, say that word again, polypsychism, meaning you think you're made out of a lot of different parts, then you can understand your existence just plain better. Now, warrior societies, as the late Dr. Stephen Polome used to point out, tend to be polypsychic. In other words, there are a lot of parts of yourself, visible and invisible, that do different things. And you can become aware of how some of these different parts act within you. It's a major reason why there's a lot of good things to look at the Egyptian model. Let's look at another aspect of the Egyptian model. In some cultures, particularly those that are attractive to esoteric practitioners, let's say, the many different religions that come out of India. I don't mean, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, and the about 5 religions that we call by the colonial term Hinduism. Not at all the same religion. These 5 religions, about 12 schools of philosophy, a lot going on there. There's this idea generally held that what we're seeing here isn't real. It's illusion. In Sanskrit, it's Maya. Originally a thing that Varuna did to kind of keep people in line. That nothing out here is real. And that probably the best thing you can do is get away from it. Okay, it's an approach. Egyptians have a very different approach. They have a lot of creation stories. And you've got 4,000 years of history, 3,000 years which are written down. We got access to some of these stories. But look at one common idea, which is the world itself was made by one god, usually Amun, in an act of magic, heka being the word used for magic in Egyptian. Also, it's the word used for art and politics. Let's keep that in mind. Let that bubble in your brain for a while. And what that means is everything you see, everything you experience, whether internally or externally, comes from magic. Therefore, learning how to deal with the energetic system of magic is, in fact, the best thing you can do during your existence. Very nice idea. Very useful if you want to have a magical approach. Now, we know, because we are modern people, magic is limited. If I become ill, if I were running a fever, if I thought the dreaded COVID had reached out and grabbed me, I'm going to a Western physician first. Absolutely. Because the best way to deal with the objective world is with objective science. But I would also be practicing magical arts. Maybe that just helps my spirit. Maybe it really does affect reality in some ways. Now, Heka is everywhere. It's a universal idea. It's in everything we talk about. Now, I'm going to talk about the 8, count them 8, separate parts of the human being according to the Egyptians. Now, 8's a big number. The reason I say 8 is a big number is human beings generally have trouble with any number bigger than 7. So I'll make it easy. I'm going to do it in 4 pairs of 2. Some of these words you've heard, some probably not, unless you've read some pretty good texts on Egyptology. If you've read older texts, say texts before 1960, you might pronounce them differently. I'll try to fill you in on some of the reasons that there's different pronunciations without really geeking out on Egyptian language, which I am often known to do. Now, the parts of the Egyptian soul, we're going to deal with the first 2 parts, the first biggest parts, the parts everybody's heard of. The Ba and the Ka. You probably have heard of these things. Particularly the Ka has really gone into fantasy literature for about the last 160, 170 years. So if you've read some fantasy novel, you've heard the word Ka, probably defined incorrectly, but you did hear it. And even Stephen King, who is not one of your better Egyptologists, picked up the word Ka, which he used in his Dark Tower series. Lots of things. He's based on the Ka. It sounds very Egyptian. Many just came out of his head. Boy, it has that great Egyptian sound. Because in Western civilization, you think of Egypt as magic. Particularly if you're English speaking and you've seen the Mummy movies, or you even read the first great mummy novel called The Mummy by Jane Webb, maybe a very distant relative of mine, Egypt has that sense of magic, of mystery, as the Egyptians would say, of shatatu. All right, the Ba and the Ka. That aspect of what you probably think of as yourself, if you think of this is me, you're thinking about your Ba. Your Ba is what you have created in response to everything that's happened in your life up to this moment. Your Ba is a momentum. It's you as a force in the real, visible world. The Ba is that part of your soul that you have most access to. And yet, the Egyptians had the idea you could talk with your Ba. Now, if you talk to yourself, and I don't mean in the sense of the crazy guy, of Golem in the hills. If you talk to yourself, you're talking to your Ba, you're talking to your experience, you're talking to your nurture, you're talking to your nature, you're talking to all those, you're talking to your cultural background. All these things make your Ba. In fact, in Egyptian, the word to teach is sabah, to create a Ba. Literally right now, I am creating a Ba in all of my listeners. They're picking up a bit of knowledge. They're saying, I don't know if I'm going to put this thing that Mr. Webb is saying in me, but I am going to pick it up, put it in my brain. That is a Ba. You may merge that with your Ba later if you think, hey, this looks good. Or you can say, wow, that guy is so full of it. I'm going to forget that. And then that Ba goes off somewhere and dies quietly and is reabsorbed by the universe. The Ba is that part of your being that is your momentum in your past. But human beings are not made of their past, are they? That's just one part of it. There's another part of you, the Ka. The Ka, which is usually shown as a glowing figure that walks behind you, is all of your possibilities. Now, you're an English speaker, and if I were to ask you where the future is, you would point in front of you and say, the future is out there coming at me. Okay, nice idea, cool. If you're an Egyptian speaker, and I said, where is the future? Where is Nah? You would point behind you, because the future comes up and grabs you by the butt. The future is the unknown, so it's behind you. And thus, your Ka is behind you. Now, to work with the Ka and the Ba, to do self-work on this, two things you do. For the Ba, you should practice self-remembering. How did I get here? What are the forces in me that I'm making decisions by? Because some of these things you don't know, you're not aware of. A lot of advertising is directed towards your Ba. And the people that do this do it really well. So when you're making a decision, how did I get here? Is the Ba question. The Ka, your possibilities, you should always be thinking about, how do I increase the power of my Ka? Now, the best way to do that is not through some ritual practice or burning kephi to an Egyptian god. The best way to increase your Ka is to do things that give you more possibilities. If you go to school and get a degree, your Ka gets stronger. If you decide to become active in a new social area, if you get beyond your comfort zone, your Ka gets stronger. Anything that makes your possibilities grow stronger. Now, the Ka, if you see it in a dream, which some of you will, having heard this lecture, you'll see it in a dream before the 21st. Just note you will. I did that to you. Actually, your brain did it. Your Ka looks like you did at your favorite time in your life. Now, most of us that tend to have the white hair have this image of ourselves as a lot younger. And we look in the mirror and we're like, who the hell is that old man? That's not what I look like. The image you're thinking of is your Ka when you think of yourself at your most powerful. And if you can focus on certain memories where you feel very powerful, your Ka will flare up and shower you down. Now, the Ka is related to that word we had said earlier, Heka. Remember, magic itself? Your Ka brings things into being by letting you see them. You know, very simplistic New Age magic of doing positive visualization. All right, that's a very ancient technique, and that's communicating with your Ka. Doesn't mean that just because you can visualize it, it happens. But it does mean you can affect things that are a little chancy by doing rational, good events, as your Ba will tell you, and adding visualization. These two components, the Ba and the Ka, follow you through life. The Ka sets up opportunities for you. The Ba gives you the strength to do those opportunities. The Ka will do things you can discover as you look back in your life. Times the Ka was very important because the Ka brings you something out of nowhere. Hey, you're at a movie and you run into that person that's your soulmate and you wind up spending the rest of your lives with them. That was due to your Ka and to his or her Ka. The older you get and the more in control of your life you have become, the Ka doesn't do the shocking, weird, here's a new door opening. If you look in your memories and see what those are like, you can begin to see how your Ka works. Okay, first two soul parts, Ba and Ka. Let's move on to two more. I'm going to talk about the Yib and the Ren. The Yib, which is spelled in modern Egyptology, JB, which is spelled in mid-century, medieval, the last century Egyptology, IB. And if you read, you got that damn Wallace Budge book you got from Dover, it's spelled AB because they thought it was more like the Hebrew word. This is always translated as the heart. Every time you see that translated. And therefore, most English speakers would think it's the heart. Not so. What it really is, it's the intelligence of yourself that moves you through the universe by connecting all the parts inside and all the world outside. They actually had a different word for the physical heart. The Eve, however, is drawn with kind of a heart shape. So people think, oh, it's the heart. I'll call it the heart because it's always translated that way. But the Egyptians did not think it was this organ right here that's pumping. They just thought it was the center point. Now, the Yib had two big functions. The Yib moves energies from the physical body to the spiritual bodies, moves energies around in the spiritual bodies, and then it's connected to the world. How is it connected to the world? Well, there's an Egyptian concept called Connective Justice. Now, again, you're going to read this in a lot of New Age books, and they're going to say, Ma'at is peace and order. Oh, okay, maybe. But here's how the Egyptians thought about it. Ma'at is being in a dynamic, healthy balance with everything in your world. And Ma'at lives in the Yib. What that means is there's a connection, if you're healthy, to your family or your job, or to certain people. Particularly those people that show up in your dreams, Ma'at is connected to them. The reason that's called connective justice, that's the best way it can be translated in English, is what you do affects things. Like tomorrow, if you get up and put in some overtime and do something really impressive for the boss, it's going to have one effect. If, on the other hand, you drive over to the boss's house and take a crap on his door, that will have a different effect. You're connected. Now, a lot of magicians don't get this. They think, well, I can think of anything in my heart and affect it. Like I can cast a spell and affect some leader of a country, some major trend. Egyptians would say no. What you can affect is your close family and friends. Really about the 250 people that are closest to you. There's a connection here, which is Ma'at, order. And Ma'at tells you the right things to do. Hey, this isn't deep. This isn't philosophical. If it's, hey, I need to sweep the floor at home, you know that. You didn't get that because you took a philosophy degree, and your Ma'at will tell you this. Now, as Ma'at enters the Yib becomes lighter. We know what that means. We know how we feel when we screwed up in some way, or if someone has rejected us and broken free from our Yib. It hurts right here, heartbreak. And in some Egyptian funerary systems, some of the later ones, by later I mean like say only 3,000 years old, there's the idea that the Yib goes into the afterlife and confesses everything to 42 judges. Here's what we did. And if the Yib is too heavy, it falls on the scale, giant ugly looking monster comes, eats your butt, no afterlife. In the earlier systems, say those about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, that was not how that worked. We'll talk about that later when we get into the principles of the afterlife. All right, your Ma'at should be here. But then there's a question. If Ma'at is order, if Ma'at is good, if Ma'at is all these things that make me happy, is it then perfect? No. Because it also means things like stasis, like not changing anything, like doing the exact same job for 35 years. Ma'at is energizing and helpful to a point. But the Egyptians never believed in anything as being the answer. There's also something opposite of Ma'at called Isfet. Isfet is positive chaos. Positive chaos is that hard-ass thing that hits you and you grow from it. Isfet can be very personal. The death of a friend, a sudden auto accident. And if you rise to the challenge of taking that chaos into yourself, that is fet into your Yib, you can become more powerful. Now, Isfet is entirely the production of one God. Yes? It's Set. Set gives you Isfet. A lot of gods give you Ma'at. You got to have the blend, though, to go on. So there's the Yib. All right. It's paired with the soul part called the Ren. Now, the Ren is very different. The Ren's your name, your reputation. It's how things you're thought of. The Egyptians say, to have a better afterlife, you got to get known. You have to do something. You got to impress your family. Those are your big 4 parts. Now I'm going to do the 4 parts that are a little bit smaller in some ways. Sekhem, power. Power is a force of light, of goodness that lets you do things. It's a gift to you from the God. Some God gave that to you. You didn't earn it. Like, I have a lot of power this way. You know your Sekhem. You know it sometime because you were really tired and you got your second wind. But Sekhem, even though we think of it as light and good and wonderful, also if it's not balanced, becomes fanatic. And the goddess of Sekhem, Sekhmet, once was so pissed off at mankind, she nearly destroyed all of them. Fortunately, the gods got her drunk and she woke up with a hangover and stopped. Sekhem, your light side, don't be too fanatic. work to make it stronger by doing whatever charity work you do in the world. It's paired with the shoot, the shadow. Not just the physical shadow of your body, all that's part of it. The shoot is that part of you that wants to do things really quickly, and usually maybe a little criminally too. The shoot can move rapidly. If your shoot is powerful, you can change things rapidly. You move around rapidly. You're really good at moving in the dark. The shoot is definitely connected with sexuality. It leads you places. The shoot would be the closest thing to the Christian idea of Satan, the tempter. Hey, come do this, come do that. But if you got a good relationship with your shoot, you can be tempted in ways that are really good. So 4 parts so far. Ka, the possible. Ba, what's happened. Sekim, your battery for goodness. The shoot, the right temptations. Let's do the next 4. Okay. I'm going to talk, I'm sorry, that's 6, also the Yib and the Red. I'm going to talk about the last 2, the Ach and the Kat. This is the Kat, your body. It only lives for a certain period of time. It's your best initiator because it makes you get out of bed and do things. I'm hungry, feed me. I'm sick, take me to the doctor. Take me for a walk. Some religions despise the body. Christianity, not so good on the body. Some groups, it's all for the body. Probably a little too much of that right now in the world, frankly. But the Kat must be respected because it's the temple for the others. And finally, the 8th part, the Ach. The Ach is the after soul. Remember those first 2 parts? The Ba, your momentum, your past. The Ka, all of your possibilities. In the 70 days after you die, these merge into one part called the Ak. And your Ak needs the help of people living to crystallize. That's why your Ren has to be powerful. When you die, somebody has to be thinking about you. Mourning is good. The Ak, called, which we translate into English as effective, or also glowing, becomes a star in the sky in the oldest of Egyptian religions. The Ak lives forever and ever if you've prepared it all your life to do so and say, hey, I'm not going to be living in this world forever. Some people fail at that. They never tell their Ak their life will be different. Those Aks that don't understand they died, they become the Mut, the evil spirit, the ghost, the thing that all those paranormal people love. These last a while and then they die. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up because I know there's another speaker. Look for my next coming out book, The Energy Magic of the Vampire, be out from Inner Tradition soon. Or if you like good scary fiction, read my current book, Building Strange Temples. It has been a total pleasure. I'm so glad you let me be part of your lives. And I'll point out the Texas Anomaly Archives is really close to getting a matching grant. So if you can give a little bit of money today, that's a big help to those guys. There's a lot of weird things in Texas, so we need archives. All right, my friends. I will have other events in different media, of course, next year. But I really, really hope you guys keep the Texas Anomaly Archives alive. All right, guys.
Oh man, thank you so much, Don. Really enjoyed that. I can't wait to watch that several more times. As you might imagine, I'm a little distracted during this whole thing, and as much as I want to give my full attention to each presentation, it can be a little difficult. But there's just so much good information there that I want to digest more deeply. So, and I can't wait to dive into some more of your books, both your fiction and your nonfiction. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
I'm really glad. It's a really good cause, guys. There's a lot of weird things in Texas, and we need to keep track of them. There's a lot of weird things in Texas.
Indeed. And yes, our listeners and watchers are very much thankful for your presentation. So, well, I'll be in touch, Don, and you have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, folks. So coming up next is our next presenter, Dr. Greg Little. Will be back in just a moment. You can go to the website. We are fast approaching our $5,000 first big milestone, and we'll continue in just a moment.